Lily often found herself lost in the bittersweet memories of her childhood, her thoughts inevitably circling back to the day her world changed forever. She was only 6 years old when her father, Arthur, passed away, but the memory of that spring morning was etched into her mind with startling clarity. It had started as one of their happiest family mornings. Arthur, wearing his favorite apron, stood at the stove flipping pancakes into whimsical shapes, stars, moons, and even smiling faces. Lily sat on a stool, giggling as he made funny voices for each pancake character. Her mother, Sarah, bustled about the kitchen, humming softly, setting the table for their cozy breakfast ritual. "Princess, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," Arthur called out, waving his spatula like a wand. Lily jumped up eagerly, leaving her stuffed bunny behind on the couch, and ran to the kitchen. But then everything shifted in an instant. Arthur's smile faltered, and the spatula fell to the floor with a dull thud. His hand clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. "Sarah," he managed to say before collapsing. Lily froze in shock as her mother screamed, rushing to his side. The moments that followed were a chaotic blur of flashing lights, medbots arriving, and Lily being ushered away by a neighbor. Arthur's death left a void in their small family, one that felt like a gaping wound. Sarah, once lively and full of energy, withdrew into herself. For months, their home was filled with silence and shadows. But life in Metropia didn't stop, and eventually, Sarah remarried. Richard entered their lives, a kind and gentle man who worked as an archivist. He wasn't Arthur, but he tried to bring a sense of normalcy back to the family. He introduced Lily to ancient stories and traditions, fostering a quiet bond between them. Slowly, the pieces of their fractured life started to shift into place, but things would never truly be the same. Lily's journey was only beginning, and the weight of her past would shape everything that followed. Lily was 8 years old when her mother sat her down one evening, her face alight with joy. "You're going to be a big sister," Sarah announced, placing a protective hand over her growing belly. Lily wasn't sure how to feel, excited yet apprehensive. A baby? She couldn't imagine how this would change their already fragile family dynamic. When Tommy was born, the house filled with a new kind of energy. His cries echoed through the halls, his tiny fists waving as if announcing his arrival. Sarah was over the moon, devoting every moment to her newborn. At first, Lily tried to join in, helping with diapers and making silly faces to entertain Tommy, hoping it would bring her closer to her mom. But soon, Lily began to notice a shift. Her mother's attention became entirely focused on Tommy, leaving little room for her. It started small, a forgotten lunch here, a missed bedtime story there. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," her mom would say absent-mindedly. "I've just been so busy with Tommy." Then came the bigger things, like missing Lily's school play. She had been so excited, waiting for her mom's proud smile in the audience. Instead, she saw only Richard clapping from the back row. When Lily mentioned it later, her mom waved it off, saying, "Tommy wasn't feeling well. You understand, don't you?" Richard did his best to step in where Sarah fell short. He attended Lily's karate tournaments, cheering louder than anyone when she earned a new belt. On weekends, he'd take her to the park or the local museum, trying to make her feel seen. "You're doing great, kiddo," he'd tell her, ruffling her hair. Despite his efforts, the imbalance in attention was clear. Richard often tried to talk to Sarah about it, gently suggesting she make more time for Lily. "She needs you too," he'd say. But Sarah would brush him off, insisting, "Tommy's early years are crucial. He's so sensitive, Richard. You wouldn't understand." Lily felt the sting of those words. She learned to bottle up her feelings, hiding her disappointment behind a forced smile. She cherished the moments Richard gave her, but the void left by her mother's neglect was undeniable. The arrival of Tommy had shifted the entire family dynamic. While Sarah's world revolved around her youngest child, Lily struggled to find her place, caught between longing for her mother's attention and leaning on Richard's quiet support. It was a delicate balance, one that left Lily feeling like an afterthought in her own home. The tension in Lily's household grew like a ticking clock, each argument winding it tighter. Richard, the steady anchor in their lives, had grown increasingly concerned about Sarah's overprotectiveness toward Tommy. He saw how it stifled not only Tommy's development, but also Lily's sense of belonging. One evening, as Sarah hovered over Tommy during dinner, urging him to take just one more bite, Richard put down his fork. "Sarah, we need to talk about this," he said gently. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "About Tommy," Richard replied, his voice calm but firm. "He's 5 now. He needs to learn to do things on his own. You can't keep coddling him." Sarah's face hardened immediately. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" "That's not what I'm saying, and you know it," Richard said, his tone measured. "But you're so focused on protecting him from every little thing that you're not letting him grow." "Tommy needs me," Sarah snapped. "He's sensitive, and the world is too harsh for someone like him." "And what about Lily?" Richard countered softly. "She needs you too." But Sarah wouldn't hear it. She stormed out of the room, leaving Richard and Lily in a silence that spoke volumes. Despite the friction, Richard didn't give up. He suggested activities that could help Tommy gain confidence, like joining a local kids' soccer team or trying out for a beginner art class. Each time, Sarah shot down the idea, deeming it too risky. "What if he gets hurt? Or what if the other kids tease him?" she'd say, her voice tinged with worry. Frustrated but undeterred, Richard shifted his focus to Lily, who soaked up his encouragement like sunlight. He took her to karate classes 3 times a week, staying through every session and cheering her on. With his support, Lily began to flourish, earning her belts with pride and gaining confidence in her abilities. Still, the imbalance in their home was undeniable. At every turn, Lily felt overshadowed by Tommy's constant needs and Sarah's unrelenting attention. When she showed her mom her new karate certificate, Sarah barely glanced at it before returning to Tommy's latest crayon masterpiece. Richard noticed the disappointment in Lily's eyes. One evening, after yet another tense exchange with Sarah, he sat beside Lily as she worked on her homework. "You're doing great, Lily," he said softly. "Never forget how special you are." Those moments with Richard gave Lily strength, but they couldn't erase the growing divide in their family. The tension between him and Sarah simmered like a pot about to boil over, and Lily felt trapped in the middle, longing for a sense of balance she wasn't sure they'd ever find again. Lily's high school graduation was a bittersweet day. She stood in her cap and gown, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Her mother was there, but her attention was split between her phone and hushed conversations with Tommy's babysitter. Richard, however, sat in the front row, beaming with pride, his applause the loudest when Lily's name was called. After the ceremony, the family gathered for a small celebration at home. While Sarah was preoccupied with checking on Tommy and his needs, Richard pulled Lily aside. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he said, his voice warm. "You've worked so hard for this." Lily smiled, but the moment was tinged with unease. She knew the next chapter of her life, college, would bring more tension. Richard, sensing her apprehension, led her to his study. He pulled out a folder filled with college brochures. "I've been saving up," he said, placing the folder on the desk. "You can go wherever you want. Don't let anything hold you back." Lily's heart swelled with gratitude, but before she could respond, Sarah burst into the room. "You can't be serious," she said, her tone sharp. "That money should be saved for Tommy's future. He's going to need it more." Richard's expression hardened. "This is non-negotiable, Sarah. Lily has earned this, and I'm going to make sure she gets the education she deserves." Sarah started to argue, but Richard held firm, his voice steady yet resolute. Lily stood quietly, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. For once, someone was standing up for her, and it felt like a lifeline. After much thought, Lily chose Marshall University in West Virginia. It was far enough to give her the independence she craved, but close enough to visit home occasionally. The day Richard helped her move into her dorm, Sarah stayed behind, citing Tommy's anxiety about her leaving. As they unloaded boxes and set up her new space, Richard paused to look around. "This is your new start," he said, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Make the most of it." Lily nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of possibility, a chance to carve out her own path, free from the shadow of her mother's choices. College was everything Lily had hoped for and more, a fresh start far away from the suffocating dynamics of home. At Marshall University, she discovered a newfound sense of independence. She threw herself into her journalism major, finding her passion for uncovering stories that mattered. The campus buzzed with opportunities, and Lily embraced them all: student newspapers, internships, and late-night study sessions fueled by cheap coffee. She kept her contact with home minimal, checking in with Richard occasionally. Their conversations were warm and supportive, but her calls with Sarah were brief and strained. Whenever Lily asked about Tommy, Sarah would launch into a familiar script: "He's going through a rough patch, but he's so gifted. He just needs time to figure things out." Time, however, didn't seem to be helping. Tommy, now a teenager, had grown increasingly isolated. He spent most of his days locked in his room, absorbed in video games or scrolling through social media. His interactions with the outside world dwindled to almost nothing. Richard had tried encouraging him to join clubs or take up a hobby, but Tommy dismissed the suggestions with a shrug or a muttered excuse. Sarah, as always, defended him fiercely. "He's sensitive," she'd say whenever Richard raised concerns. "He just needs the right environment to thrive." When Lily came home for short visits, she found the house unchanged: Tommy glued to a screen, Sarah fussing over him, and Richard quietly doing his best to hold things together. During one visit, Lily attempted to engage Tommy. "Want to grab lunch?" she asked, leaning into his doorway. Without looking up from his game, he muttered, "No, thanks." Lily sighed, her heart sinking. She could see how deeply Tommy had retreated into himself, yet Sarah seemed blind to it. When Lily brought it up later, Sarah brushed her off. "He's fine, Lily. He just needs time to find his path." In contrast, Lily flourished. By her senior year, she had secured a prestigious internship at a major news outlet, setting her up for a promising career. Her professors praised her work ethic, and her articles gained recognition, some even published nationally. But each achievement reminded her of the stark contrast between her life and Tommy's. While she was building her future, he remained trapped in a cycle of dependency, enabled by their mother's excuses. Lily tried not to dwell on it too much. She had worked hard to carve out her own path, and she wasn't about to let the weight of her family's choices pull her down. Still, a part of her couldn't help but wonder if Tommy would ever break free from the cocoon their mother had built around him, or if he even wanted to. Lily excitedly prepared for her housewarming party, her first real milestone of independence. She sent invitations to her family, eager to share the moment. On the day of the event, she anxiously set the table and waited. The doorbell rang, and her heart lifted, but when she opened the door, only Richard stood there. "Where's Mom and Tommy?" Lily asked, trying to mask her disappointment. Richard sighed. "Your mom said Tommy had plans, and she didn't want to leave him alone." Lily forced a smile and let him in. Over dinner, the conversation was light until Lily finally asked, "How are things at home?" Richard's expression darkened. "Tommy's not doing well, Lily. He's still in the same routine, gaming all day, refusing to work or go out. I've tried to help, but your mother, she won't listen." "She's enabling him," Lily said bitterly, stabbing at her lasagna. Richard nodded. "Every time I bring it up, she says I'm being too hard on him. But this isn't helping him, it's holding him back." Lily felt a wave of frustration. "I've worked so hard to get here, to move forward. I can't keep being dragged back by their choices." "You're right," Richard said, his voice gentle. "You deserve to live your own life, Lily. Don't let this hold you down." That night, after Richard left, Lily sat alone in her quiet apartment. She felt a mix of guilt and determination. She couldn't save them, but she could save herself, and that was the path she chose to follow. Richard's death hit like a thunderclap, sudden and devastating. Lily received the news late one evening, a massive heart attack, the same way her father had passed. By the time she arrived at the hospital, Richard was already gone. The funeral was a somber affair. Sarah put on a dramatic display of grief, sobbing loudly and clinging to Tommy, who looked uncomfortable and distracted. Lily, however, knew her mother's tears weren't entirely for Richard. They were for the loss of the financial stability he had provided. In the weeks that followed, the household fell into chaos. Without Richard's income, the bills began to pile up. Sarah, overwhelmed and panicking, leaned even more heavily on Lily. "We're barely getting by," she said one evening, her voice trembling. "I don't know how we'll survive." Meanwhile, Tommy showed no signs of stepping up. He continued spending his days glued to his computer, playing games or scrolling through social media. "He's under so much stress," Sarah would say, defending his behavior whenever Lily brought it up. Frustrated but unwilling to abandon them completely, Lily decided to help financially. She set up monthly transfers to cover the essentials, but it came at a cost. Her savings for a future home dwindled, and the tension between her and Sarah grew with every passing month. "I can't keep doing this forever, Mom," Lily said during one of her visits. "Tommy needs to find a job or contribute somehow." Sarah's response was sharp. "Don't you dare talk about your brother that way. He's going through a difficult time. You'll never understand how sensitive he is." Lily's patience wore thin. Sensitive or not, he's an adult. He can't keep living like this while I pick up the pieces. But her words fell on deaf ears. Sarah refused to acknowledge the problem, and Tommy remained content in his stagnant routine, shielded by their mother's endless excuses. Lily felt trapped between her sense of responsibility and the growing resentment she harbored. Every visit home was a reminder of the family's disarray, and each financial transfer felt like a weight pulling her down. Richard had been the glue holding them together, and without him, the fractures in their family became impossible to ignore. Lily knew she couldn't carry them forever, but the guilt of walking away was a burden she wasn't ready to face. For now, she stayed, but the cracks in their fragile relationship widened with each passing day. Lily hadn't planned on staying long during her visit home, but as she unpacked groceries in the kitchen, she overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. "Tommy, we're set now," Candy's voice floated in from the living room. "Your mom signed the house over to you. We don't have to worry about a thing." Lily's heart dropped. She stormed into the room, her voice sharp and demanding. "What did you just say?" Candy barely looked up, her smirk infuriating. "Oh, didn't your mom tell you? Tommy owns the house now. It's all official." Lily spun around and marched into the kitchen where her mom was sorting through a stack of papers. "Is it true?" Lily demanded, her voice trembling. "You signed the house over to Tommy?" Sarah hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the papers. "Lily, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Lily interrupted, her anger surging. "That after everything I've done for this family, you didn't even tell me? I've been helping you financially for years, and this is how you repay me?" Sarah's face hardened defensively. "Tommy needs stability. He's been through so much. You wouldn't understand." Lily's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. "I wouldn't understand? You've been making excuses for him his entire life, while I've worked my ass off to make something of myself. And now you're just handing everything over to him. He's my son, and he needs me." Sarah snapped. "You've always been independent, Lily. You don't need me like he does." Lily took a step back, stunned by the admission. "You've always chosen him over me, haven't you? No matter how much I've tried, it was never enough." Sarah's expression wavered, but she stood firm. "Tommy is fragile. You'll be fine, Lily. You've made it on your own." Lily's voice was cold now, her decision clear. "You're right. I will be fine. But not because of you." She took a deep breath and added, "I'm done, Mom. I'm cutting off the financial support. From now on, you and Tommy are on your own." Sarah gasped. "Lily, you can't mean that. We need your help." But Lily had already turned to leave, her voice steady as she said, "Maybe it's time Tommy learns to stand on his own 2 feet." She walked out, her heart heavy but resolute. The weight of years of neglect and favoritism lifted as she closed the door behind her. For the first time, Lily felt free to live her life without the shadow of her family's dysfunction holding her back. Lily sat by the window of her apartment, the city lights twinkling in the distance. For the first time in years, she felt a calm she hadn't known was possible. Walking away from her family had been painful, but with each passing day, the weight lifted a little more. She no longer carried the burden of trying to fix what was beyond her control. She reflected on the years spent seeking her mother's approval and being overshadowed by Tommy. All those moments of being pushed aside, forgotten, or taken for granted now seemed like lessons, hard ones, but valuable nonetheless. She had realized that her worth wasn't defined by anyone else, not even her family. Her achievements, her resilience, and her ability to stand tall despite it all were proof of her strength. With newfound clarity, Lily began planning her future. The money she once sent home would now be invested in her dreams, a down payment on her own house, travel to places she'd only read about, and savings for the life she wanted to build. It was time to focus on herself, to give her energy to the things that truly mattered. As she sorted through old belongings, Lily came across a photo of her father. She smiled softly, tracing the edges of the frame. "I hope you'd be proud of me," she whispered. And deep down, she knew he would be. With that, Lily packed away the past, not with bitterness, but with acceptance. She wasn't running from her family's shadows anymore. She was stepping into her own light. The road ahead was hers to pave, and she was ready to embrace it fully, free from the chains of guilt and manipulation. Finally, she was at peace, strong, independent, and whole.